Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Kamau. I come from an East African country called Kenya. You've heard him talk a little bit about it. And I'm the user experience lead at the iHub. And together with me is Jeff Miner, and he's the multimedia lead at the iHub. Now, I'd like to tell you about my country. In 2007, Kenya was flying high. We had just come out of a dictatorship that lasted 24 years. And we were doing economically well. And politically, we were stable. And, go back. Sorry. No, you should go back. I'll tell you.
No, go back, it's just here.
Yeah, sorry. It's not working.
No?
No.
Let me see. I
Okay.
think it should work now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Excuse me for that. Now, in this period of this prosperity and political stability, we had elections. And I flew from Amsterdam to go to Kenya to participate in this democratic process. Now, at the end of that day, I was one of the happiest people. It was one of the most important and proudest days of my life because I saw fellow Kenyans queuing for over 6 hours in the scorching African heat to express their democratic right. And as I went to sleep, I was a proud African man, proud of my country. But then over the next few days, all hell broke loose. The results of the elections were disputed, and there was extreme violence. Over 1,500 people were killed, 1,500. And over 500,000 people were displaced, Kenyans standing against each other. And for me and the rest of the Kenyans, it was a shock, even to the government. And the government didn't even know how to deal with this situation. The mainstream media didn't know how to deal with this situation. In fact, they tried to play it down as a strategy. Some of the media organizations were showing regular news, regular programming, showing movies and cartoons while people were killing each other. Now, in this context is where Ushahidi was born. Ushahidi means witness or testimony in Swahili. Now, it was a platform that could allow ordinary Kenyans to talk about what was happening to them and around them. And this critical information could be used by relief organizations to provide very, very critical relief to people who needed it. And since then, this tool became Kenya's gift to humanity. It was made open source, and it has been translated to over 150, it has been used in over 130 countries and translated to over 30 languages. Now, it has been an impressive tool it's been used in very many contexts. In the earthquake in Japan, for instance, in the election in 2009 in India, in the Japanese earthquake, it was used during the swine flu and the oil spills recently. Now, 5 years later, we had to do another election. And I want you to imagine the situation in Kenya after the extreme violence of the previous elections. Now, we were wondering, what can we do to prevent a similar situation? And it is in this atmosphere of uncertainty that Uchaguzi was born. Now, Uchaguzi was a platform, or is a platform, that allowed for ordinary Kenyans to actively participate during the election of their leaders. And through Uchaguzi, they could send reports of what was happening around them during the elections. Now, people could send these reports about, for instance, bribery, intimidation of voters, violence, And this allowed for appropriate action to be taken proactively. I'll give you a quick example or a quick explanation of how Uchaguzi works. The information would be sent from all over the country, and it would come to a central space where there was an army of volunteers who would process this information for appropriate proactive action. I give you an example. We have over 42 languages in Kenya, and people would send messages in their vernacular. There'd be a team that would translate this information into English for action. And there were cases where we had messages that were talking about emergency situations of violence, rape, whatever it might be. And this would be escalated to the right authorities for action before the situation escalated to the levels that it did in 2007. Now, this was only possible because of a lot of volunteers, and predominantly who came from the community called the iHub. And what is the iHub? The iHub is a community right now that consists of over 10,000 people. And it basically has a mission to grow and to catalyze tech and innovation in Africa, in Nairobi and in Africa in general. And it also aims to use technology for social and economic good. And this community actually helped run Uchaguzi and build these technologies. Now, what can we learn from Africa? What can we learn from Kenya when we look at how we've been able to rise beyond the tragedy and build tools that can be used across the world, really? Human-centered design is the message today. Like, as we build for democracy, we have to have a human-centered design approach. And this means the extreme emphasis on the context and the people we design for, to have deep empathy for what is happening around them and involving them in the building of the solutions. And what do we need to be able to do this? We need to have an anti-expert attitude. And this sounds obvious or wrong, but it is what we need. We sit here in our different capacities, and the word expert, to be honest, is one that actually I'm afraid of, because it implies superior knowledge, and we prescribe when we are experts. So we sit in boardrooms, and we try and build solutions that we take down to people to use, right? But then to be able to build sustaining solutions that go beyond the initial euphoria, for instance, of uprisings, like during the Arab Spring, we actually need to have an anti-expert attitude, to listen and to delve into the contexts of people we're developing solutions for. And being an expert almost, in many situations, actually prevents us from learning. And the solutions we build need to be lean, agile, and context responsive. A good example is my colleague led a team during the elections where, when the results came, while people are on the move in the cars and couldn't access mainstream media, this tool could tap into the API of the Election and Boundaries Commission and present the results on people's mobile phones so that the process was more transparent. And this, I think, these kind of interventions, this kind of responsive, context-relevant tools allowed for the situation not to escalate like it did in 2007. And it takes a team. In Africa, we have what we call Ubuntu, which translates to human kindness. And it takes people coming together, despite difficult circumstances, to be able to build and transcend tragedies. In Kenya specifically, it takes a spirit of Harambee. Harambee is coming together for the common good. And I think these are lessons we can learn from Africa. And as we build solutions, if we sit in strategic boardrooms, and I don't mean one baseline survey or questionnaire, or focus group discussion, but truly involving people, bringing them together and making them part and parcel of building solutions for them. It doesn't matter if they come from a village, they still understand what happens to them. And they say, he who has the shoe knows where it hurts. So why do we design solutions without involving people? And I think that's the biggest lessons we've been learning as we build tools that we are able to share with the rest of the world. And as my colleague and friend Eric Hassman says, if it works in Africa, it can work everywhere. Thank you.